We've got ones that can see. Welcome everybody to today's show. If you haven't seen the ridiculousness that continues to be Kanye West, or as he now refers to himself, Ye, you've got to see some of the things that he's once again doing out in the open. Kanye West had an interview where he was wearing a KKK outfit and a swastika necklace. And of course, we all know Kanye West is playing a role. He's pretending to be Christian. He's pretending to be anti a certain group of people. And we've seen this happening a lot now, where these people are aligning themselves against this specific group of people like Kanye West or Dave Chappelle, yet they continue to get major deals with Netflix or get major record deals. They continue to get promoted. Nothing ever happens to them, and they never get silenced, because this is done by design. The way that Kanye West acts, how he shows himself, and then the way that he discusses this thing with this certain group of people by saying that they control and rule everything and that they need to be stopped, and wearing the KKK outfit and wearing a swastika. This all plays into the hand of those same people, because it creates an illusion in people's minds that people who think this way or speak this way are actually crazy, insane people like Kanye West continues to look, which is why he's been yoked up with Christianity by design. They're making people who speak about the synagogue of Satan look like complete maniacs. Yet he never actually reveals any truth when he speaks. He just continues to sound like a crazy person. So I want to show you some of these things with Kanye West, because this is making headlines that he was wearing a black KKK outfit, that he was wearing a swastika. And of course, he is a black man and he's not wearing a white KKK outfit. He's wearing a black KKK outfit. And everybody out there is just confused. They're confused. They're looking at Kanye West. They're saying that he's racist. They're saying that he's selling swastika t-shirts on his website. And really, part of the interview, he talked about a lot of those things, including the fact that he regrets having kids with Kim Kardashian, trying to play the role that he's opposed to Kim Kardashian. He's opposed to these Hollywood elites who are involved in a lot of these things with children. Yet, of course, we've seen his child right out in the open at a young age in magazine shoots carrying around that red balloon, which I've exposed to you before, which shows you that he's in the club, because he still has a right to his child. But of course, this is part of him pretending like he's playing the opposition to the New World Order. Remember, they control both sides. So these people who come out like Cat Williams, like Kanye West, like Dave Chappelle, they're playing a role pretending that they're opposition to the Illuminati, like they're exposing it. But they're allowed to expose it out in the open. They're allowed to expose it on Joe Rogan's show or some of these podcasts that get millions of views, and nothing ever happens to them. Because remember, they control both sides, and it's the same thing we see with the alt-right media. So over the years, before I get into the outfit that he's wearing and the symbolism to it, because that's what really everybody should be talking about. We've obviously seen Kanye West over the years expose himself out in the open, right? We've seen him yoked up with P. Diddy. We've seen him yoked up with Jay-Z, doing the hidden hand, doing the pyramid symbols, of course, somehow connected to Donald Trump, because, of course, they knew all of this stuff, where it was going to go when they started putting Donald Trump with Kanye West. Then Kanye West becomes a minister, and Donald Trump gets yoked up with God and divine intervention. This is all part of a major deception, a psychological operation. Of course, we saw Kanye West do Donda, which should have been enough for Christians to see that Kanye West was not an actual Christian. I exposed that entire ritual. The video is available on the website, but he was bringing out Marilyn Manson. You know, Marilyn Manson, one of the most openly satanic people out there. Of course, people believe that he doesn't really worship Satan, that it's just an act, because they'll believe anything they hear. These people are not judging them by their fruits. They're just taking them at their word. The devil himself could show up and say, hey, I'm the devil, but I'm a good guy. And these people say, hey, maybe we should give him a chance. And that's probably what we're headed towards, right? We've had Kanye West, of course, dressed up and openly mock our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, whether he was dressing up with the crown of thorns on the Rolling Stone magazine cover or bringing a fake depiction of Jesus on stage, or, you know, writing his own Bible, right? I mean, Kanye West wrote his own Bible when he started referencing himself as Ye, and nobody out there seemed to find that blasphemous either. People actually believed he was still a Christian when he wrote the book of Yeezus, if that's not blasphemous enough. And of course, we saw him yoked up with Joel Osteen, which should be enough for anybody out there to say, all right, if you're yoked up with Joel Osteen, I mean, we could tell a real follower of Christ from a caricature of what a Christian minister is supposed to be. And again, the CIA created this evangelical movement, so Christians act a certain way, look a certain way. It's part of behavioral control and how they've molded Christians into this cookie cutter theme of what we see Christians as now. Oh, we got to tolerate everything. And, oh, what would Jesus do? And they act as if Jesus didn't, go into the temples and flip over the tables and yell at the Pharisees. They act as if Jesus, if he saw the devil himself, would have hugged and embraced him. If Jesus saw some of the acts that these people were committing underground in darkness, that Jesus would have said, oh yeah, I forgive you. Come on, let's go eat together, as if he wouldn't have been angry about it, right? That's part of the formulated Christianity that they've created. Kanye West also has had his wolves video. If that wasn't obvious enough, where he was admitting to being a wolf in sheep's clothing. So recently we've seen him obviously yoked up with the alt-right media. That's done by design, right? Candace Owens suddenly speaking out against these same people builds credibility for Candace Owens, right? Some of these other characters that we see that get a large following that pretend to be oppressed and pretend to be silenced, right? And then you see him, of course, wearing the swastika on his neck. So the important thing to note here is the symbolism behind it, because of course everybody sees the swastika, they automatically think of Hitler and the Nazis, and they don't know that these symbols are all occult in origin, and they're showing this right in front of our faces, right? And again, this goes back to Madame Blavatsky, the heifer itself, Madame Blavatsky. I mean, if you're ever going to think in your head and close your eyes of what, Buzz's girlfriend, a heifer, looks like, you would think it would be Madame Blavatsky. But the origins of the swastika, which do originate from India, not actually Germany, the origins do go back to the occult. Blavatsky imported the swastika as a symbol of highest spiritual and occult significance and associated it with the fourth and especially the fifth spiritual, quote, root race of man, who alone can move history towards the new order. Because remember, the New World Order, people forget that all of these teachings from Blavatsky to Bailey, to Alice Bailey, to Aleister Crowley, they're constantly talking about a new order and the coming of the ages. So the swastika itself is rooted in the occult. And of course, the guy who's known for that symbol and the people who are known for it, well, they were actually rooted in occultism as well. It has nothing specifically to do with a hatred towards a certain group of people, because as we know, history is manipulated. What they tell us actually occurred and who was actually targeted is never really true. In fact, if we actually looked at history, we'd be talking more about the Armenian genocide than any other genocides that have occurred through history. Of course, that can't be discussed because Christians can't be looked at as victims. They have to be looked at as the big bad bully. So that way they can continue to turn people against them. And eventually when they try to wipe them out and persecute them, the majority of people will not feel sympathy towards that group of people. So Blavatsky, in the book Spiritual Progress and Practical Occultism, talked about the swastika as the Hermetic cross. So that's the reason that you see them use this symbol. That's why Kanye West uses this symbol. And if you think about it, what sense does it make that he's actually wearing? Well, of course, they want you to think that he's against the Jewish people. That's one of the ruses that they're pulling on society. I mean, you could even look at some of the symbols for the Hermetic cross, and you could see, well, there's a certain symbol that we would say is represented by a certain group of people, right? Then we would see the pyramid, as above, so below. We see that in a lot of occult symbolism, a lot of different sects of Satanism, of course. But that symbol that you see right there happens to be underneath that star that you're supposed to call the Star of David, which is really the Star of Raphaim or Raphan in Acts chapter 7, verse 43. Yeah, ye took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, figures which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. So you could see that specific star, you could see that specific swastika, and of course, you could see the serpent eating its own tail, which is another symbol that we see associated with the occult, right? As well as the Ankh that is placed right in the middle of that star. So it is an occult symbol that most people out there, they see it, they've been trained to automatically think it means one thing, and to never to realize that the symbol's been around for a very long period of time, and the people who use that symbol all worship the same God, Lucifer. Now that brings me to the outfit, because you would think by the year 2025 that people out there would actually know the origins and be angry about the origins of how we even had a group in the United States of America called the Ku Klux Klan, right? But the origin of the Ku Klux Klan and the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan go back to a few specific people, which include General Albert Pike. So if people out there knew that Albert Pike was one of the people responsible for the creation of the Ku Klux Klan and the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and was also one of the people responsible for becoming not just one of the leaders of Freemasonry, one of the faces of Freemasonry, whose teachings are taught throughout Freemasonry, you would think that people would say, you know what? If this is where the origins of this came, it didn't happen organically. A bunch of people didn't just hang out at a bar and say, you know what, I don't like people with the opposite skin color for no reason whatsoever. There was a strategy to this because it's all about divide and conquer. So they created groups within groups to start dividing the people. It's the oldest trick in the book. Albert Pike is one of the central figures in the development of Freemasonry and became a national leader of that organization. In fact, some of his books like Morals and Dogma continue to be taught to this day. And if you look at, some of the imagery in it, you can see all of the Masonic imagery, right? Including that pyramid with the all-seeing eye that's on the back of your dollar bill. And you know what else Albert Pike just happened to be all-knowing and knowledgeable about? All these created wars that they actually fabricate and create themselves to bring about a new order, right? Things like the plot of the Civil War all could be rooted back to Freemasonry and Albert Pike. Or how about just how Albert Pike conveniently wrote about how World War I and World War II and World War III would all play out. World War III with the Zionists versus the global Islamic leaders, which you see going on right now. That's about to get even more ignited in the upcoming months, especially with Donald Trump in power. All of these things are scripted and formulated. So if the people out there looked at them and they said, well, wait a minute, this guy Pike, he's one of the people responsible for creating this hate group or whatever they want to call it in today's world, right? This control group that was created to divide the people and enslave people and mentally enslave people. Well, then we should look to the Masonic lodges and we should take them down and we should actually look at what they teach. But of course, you don't hear Kanye West, you don't hear Candace Owens, you don't hear any of the alt-right media ever expose Freemasonry. Isn't that interesting? They never go into the DeMolay, how they groom children, how most people out there have a tough time understanding when some of these events happen at schools and these events are faked, that they actually have their DeMolay in place, or they have their Rainbow Girls, which is the female version, where the Eastern Star Witches groom them and the Freemasons groom the DeMolay. And these people take vows of secrecy and loyalty to these adults who groom them. And then they carry those events out as actors. They go on the news and they're smirking and they have a script that they read and they go on every news station for days on end. They don't even show an emotion, right? Because it all gets rooted back to these same people who just conveniently happen to start these wars and know how these wars are going to go. And of course, what's the thing everybody should know about these people who should be disbanded? Well, it's their worship of Lucifer, right? Because if people realize that this was all rooted in Satanism and Luciferianism, well, guess what? It wouldn't exist anymore if they knew that they were conspiring against all of us. Straight, gay, black, white, Christian, Islamic, whatever it might be, right? I mean, this is from Albert Pike's own mouth. That which we must say to the crowd is, we worship God, but it is the God that one adores without superstition. To you, sovereign grand inspectors general, we say this, that you may repeat to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees, the Masonic religion should be by all of us initiates of the high degrees maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. If Lucifer were not God, would Jesus spread false and harmful statements about him? Yes, Lucifer is God, according To Albert Pike even goes on to say, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning. Is it he who bears the light? And with its splendors, intolerable blinds, feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not. Because all of these Freemasons are taught that Lucifer is God, and that is who they worship. That's why they say to Freemasons, well, you have to believe in a God to join Freemasonry, right? Because we don't have time to pull you away from atheism, because it's such a ridiculous concept that we created too, that we've done on purpose to make people believe in a completely fictional reality that we evolved from monkeys. We don't have time to indoctrinate you with the existence of God. So you got to believe in God, and then we'll tell you that really the Bible's inverted and Lucifer's the God that we all worship, and you're going to worship him too if you're in our cult known as Freemasonry, right? So this is what's funny about all this stuff. When all this stuff with Antifa was going on and the social justice crap, they called on the statue of Albert Pike to be taken down, right? Because he was a Confederate and all this other stuff they put out there, but they never mentioned Freemasonry. Because then you would think, well, if Albert Pike is this big, bad, racist man, then shouldn't we look to the other thing that he was involved in? If he was involved in the KKK, why are we not looking at Freemasonry? Well, they don't want you to think about that. That's why it never got mentioned. So they took the statue down on purpose, because all these events where the statues were taken down, the government staged all of those. They paid people to take it down. Those people never went to jail. They were all named John and Jane Doe. And the stories just got dropped. But that was very important for them to do that, to take down the statue of the Confederate soldier Albert Pike, so that Donald Trump could come out and order the statue to be put back up, because it continues to keep people in what? This divide and conquer narrative. Oh, Donald Trump's a racist. He wants the statue of this racist to be put back up. But again, nobody mentions Freemasonry. Nobody mentions Madame Blavatsky. Nobody mentions the origins of the occult and Luciferian worship, right? And Trump was very angry that the statue got taken down, only because he had to play the role that he was in support of the Confederates to make other people out there who are Democrats, liberals, angrier at him, right? He never came out and said, hey, you know, Albert Pike was also a Freemason. And nobody ever mentioned it on the news and said, hey, it was a great thing on the liberal media on CNN. Nobody came out and said, hey, the statue of Albert Pike was taken down. Maybe we should also look at Freemasonry and treason and have these Freemason lodges shut down, because that's where they conspire, and that's where the conspiracy that they like to call it theory, the conspiracy fact, really evolves from. And remember, these are the same people whose motto is Ordo ab chaos, which is order out of chaos. And that's what you see going on around us. Order out of chaos, and of course, divide and conquer. And it's working. And Kanye West is playing into that, because when he does these things, everybody gets angry at him, right? But everybody sees that, then they think of, okay, Kanye West is wearing a swastika, so he supports Hitler, but he's also a Christian. So where do you think they start planting these seeds subconsciously about Christians being white nationalists and supporting Hitler? Nobody goes into detail about where the origins of the KKK comes from, and how the same guy responsible for the KKK, right, is actually also one of the leaders, the founding fathers of Freemasonry. You got the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, you got Freemasonry. But nobody mentions Freemasonry, right? Incredible. Because they're not going to expose that this is all about Luciferian worship and bringing about that new order that they all constantly speak of. And of course, you know that the alt-right media, they don't go into detail about this. There's a reason that they've had some of these characters start talking about the synagogue of Satan, because it plays into the division. It plays into Christian nationalism. It plays into anti-you-know-what. And then they go off on these tirades, or they look like complete lunatics, like Kanye West looks like, instead of just saying, hey, let's look at the origins of some of these things they don't want us to talk about. Let's talk about the fact that you can't talk about some of this stuff. Hey, let's also talk about the connection with all of that stuff and those specific people in a certain books that they read, and Freemasonry and the Eastern Star. And of course, they won't do that because they're members of the same secret society. So everybody's upset about Kanye West. Well, not everybody is, but I mean, people out there see it, they get angry, and then other people out there, you know, they call it despicable, like some of the headlines say. And he goes on rants about, you know, God's plan, about him and Kim Kardashian, and he regrets having kids with her, and she's corrupting the kids. He's not corrupting the kids, right? When you see the kid doing the photo shoot with the red balloon, that's all you need to know. And how he's yoked up with Donald Trump. He's yoked up with Joel Osteen. He's yoked up with Christianity, right? By design, even though he's out right in front of your face doing videos calling himself a wolf, showing himself demonically possessed, right? It's so easy to see for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.